Finances Standing Committee. Financial Standing Committee of the Clear Creek Community Services District. Let's begin by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. So the flag's in the back over there. On three, 1, 2, 3.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A little bit.
It's plenty warm.
No, you turn it off?
Yeah, I think it's pretty warm.
Yeah, say
Please.
that.
Not to be too picky here. Okay, so the first item on our agenda is open times. Does anyone want to address the standing committee on matters that aren't on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to item number 2, which is a report of the accounting findings. Okay, Salvadano will do that. Am I correct in that right? Salvadano. I gotta get more.
You gotta cast it.
Yeah, faster. Very good.
All right, yeah, we started looking at, the audit report from 2020, and I tried to trace the numbers through so that I'd understand what the accounting flow was. And from there, I ended up doing some, looking a lot deeper into certain areas. You know, I did transactional testing basically on everything, and looked at some other things, and we had some items that in the accounting that need to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. You know, the first one was that the district didn't book the audit adjustments from 2019 and also from 2020. And that creates a big problem because when you don't do that, then it's hard to use the books because you don't have beginning balances in particularly the payables and receivables accounts. You know, the revenues and expenses go away at the end of the year, but the others carry forward, and so there's a problem trying to figure out where you're at, actually. So, you know, the first thing is that, you know, first one was a recommendation that, you know, we have to get those entries booked so that we're complete and usable. The next one was that weren't maintaining capital asset ledgers and not retiring capital assets. So again, the capital assets and depreciation and accumulated depreciation were sort of being done by the auditor and not at the district. And you know, we're again making a recommendation that we need to develop a capital asset program and start putting that together properly. I guess.
When was the last time it was done properly?
Okay, like I said, it was being maintained basically by the auditors, but not here, and then with not booking the.
So you have no record of the last time it was done, right? You don't have a record the last time it was done, right?
I have a copy of what the auditors did in,
So you're, okay, so you're getting into books that you can't find out anything about. Unless you go back to the auditor, and the auditor's in San Francisco?
I think they're somewhere north of San Francisco, yeah.
Okay. So long-term, trying to find out how we stand.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. So like I said, that was a significant one, and, you know, the other one is that since, we weren't calculating or reporting the depreciation on the assets, went back and, you know, there's, state controller guidance on the, service districts. And it says that the entity portion, the sale of the water, has to be on full approval. So we have to have the depreciation expense on the books and calculated it's, I said if we were looking at just the activity report as it stands, you're leaving out big chunks of money, and that's why we always get surprised with a loss at the end of the year. So, you know, the third recommendation was to put that on. And then the fourth one was on reconciliations, which is that, we have a general ledger system, and there's two sub-ledgers, you know, cubics for the water receivables and checks for the payroll. And they're not reconciling the sub-ledgers to the general ledger. And, you know, as a result of that, you know, you have some overstatements, understatements, you know, depending on which way the reconciliation could go. Also, just in general, you know, that there should be a mechanism where you can auto-post these things instead of having to, you know, they're doing manual postings, which creates the out of balance, and then, you know, that there should be an auto-post function where you wouldn't be developing these kind of out of balances. I mean, you still do your reconciliation, but they shouldn't be a big deal. But,
Is that due to outdated software or just
I-
not being
I'm-
used properly?
I'm not sure whether it's, you know, you need to buy another module or whether it's, just, not adequately trained or used or whatever, you know, that's sort of Bill's issue, you know, spend money or whatever. And then the last one that was, you know, was that, you have a lot of hanging account, well, every 10 hanging accounts, you know, that would be an account that hasn't been used, in this case, hasn't been used in at least 2 years and still has a dollar balance in it. And again, that's something where, you know, typically at the end of the year, you look for, you know, if there was no activity, then you try to figure out what's going on and get in and clean it up then, as opposed to just letting them continue to sit up there out of balance. So those are the major findings that we had. On this, there was, you know, on the reconciliation and the water receivable, it is very strange, and we're going to refer that to an outside, I'm going to recommend that we refer to an outside auditor to do specialized testing on the water receivable. And that's it.
And when you say specialized testing, in language I could follow, what does that mean?
In a financial audit, you would say, okay, this is the number in the sub-ledger, and the general ledger is wrong, and you just make the general ledger smaller. What we want to do is find out why it's going that way, you know, what is driving it. Because it, you know, like I said, it was significant, you know, it's what, almost $200,000 in 2020, and it looks like a big number again. So,
Yeah, from some of my talks, I'm not saying that's the case here, but typically when someone does audits, when they find the sub ledgers and the journal ledger not balancing, doesn't that not raise a red flag for potential? I'm not saying it happened, but potential theft.
Yes, there is that potential, and that's part of the reason that we are going to do expanded testing.
Good.
Yeah, yes, in audit words, it creates a condition where records could be, you know, the records could be misstated and or potential for abuse.
Right. What is the difference between the sub-ledgers and the general? What was the difference there? You mentioned there was one.
I'm not even sure, I'm just looking at the number, the way it blew up, you know, it increased by $500,000 during 2020, so, you know, that It's
Significant
it's-
difference.
Yeah, it's significant, you know.
So either there's some massive errors or some real issues.
And again, like I said, we're going to look at, you know, part of the water receivable entry is an offset against the checking account, so we'll
Okay.
be taking a little bit of a look at that.
If it appears there are abuses, are you gonna recommend a forensic audit? A more expanded audit,
I think this is a forensic audit.
Also. focusing in one narrow area?
Right, because based on what I've seen, everything else is going through reasonably,
Okay,
and, you know, we have a state-approved list of vendors and blah, 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 so, you know, the rest of it that we've looked at is probably good. So, you know, if there is an issue, that's where it's gonna be.
okay. Have you looked into potential abuses in time cards?
We have not looked at time cards and we've not looked at fixed asset, at capital asset disposals.
Okay. Would you have the time to look into the time cards? We're finding some things that don't look good.
As time permits, I think would be a fair way to
Right.
look at it.
I understand
You know,
that.
we need to, what I think we're gonna do is, as Dave alluded to, we're gonna take that hard look at the reconciliation, the lack of reconciliation between, water receivables on the sub-ledger and the ledger, and then, you know, we'll let that take us where it takes us.
I
And then,
understand.
you know, it's gonna be piecemeal, like, we're not gonna promise that we're gonna,
Yeah.
we will look into all malfeasance that we uncover, obviously,
Sure.
but we haven't developed a timeline.
Yeah, you know, I said, you know, I'd certainly be willing to look at whatever you've got on the time cards.
Excellent. That was on the agenda for last board meeting, but I was not able to attend. My only reason for bringing that up is if you're going to schedule and pay for a forensic audit, adding one or two other things is minimal additional cost instead of having separate audits for separate things.
Correct, yeah, that would
So
be,
it would save the district money.
right, well, what is the issues that you've got with the time cards?
Overtime. Heavy amounts of overtime that wasn't needed, coming in at 3 in the morning and leaving at 2 in the afternoon.
MOU state office hours are 8 to 5, and people are coming in to sit around for 2 or 3 hours.
Wasn't there two people in
Consistently.
particular that had like 2 hours of overtime
Yes.
every day?
Every day.
Yeah.
And there was
And
an
working
issue, we
through
haven't
their
found out
lunches.
what is a snow day. A lot of
In Happy Valley?
Yeah.
No,
I
If
think
it
they,
happens,
I
then
think they got 10.
yeah,
Snow days.
there were something like 10 snow days granted to employees, and we were asking, what are they? What's the purpose of them? So that, you know, we have a little more understanding, it's a little more transparent.
Yeah,
Things like that.
that's concerning.
Yes.
Hearing that's very concerning. Thanks for looking into that.
There's, we feel improper sharing of vacation, sick, and comp time. You have to look into MOUs to verify exactly, but it appeared that there were things that were shared that kind of violated some things. And in a couple of instances, they were shared to help another employee out, but then never deducted from the other employee. So both got compensation. And that's not good. So
What
there's
I'd like
things
to
like that we're running across.
Yeah, you know, yeah.
What I'd like to say is that what we did at our meeting at the community center is we simply looked at a couple of the time cards. By accident, I noticed that mine was Thanksgiving week. And I've worked in private industry as, let's say, a subcontractor to whatever it is. But as far as Thanksgiving week, I'm surprised that anyone could possibly have 10 hours for each day, Sunday through Saturday, let's say, a solid week of 10 hours each and every day. That's odd.
And he was the manager.
Well, I'm gonna stay away from names or people, but that, for instance, and then if, for myself, I always fill out my own time card. The other thing that I guess I'm gonna point out is that I've always had a diary. And I've been
What?
told a diary
Oh.
of, let's say, generally what you do in a day, or at least any time that the state has given me a questionnaire about what I do, what's my scale. Pretty much what's always been made clear is, do you have a diary? Do you keep track of the hours that you work in a day? That in the event that anything came up, that you know how many hours in a day you have. Now, obviously, I've got a different pay scale than any type of a government worker, public worker, or this is formulated, but I've never heard of such a thing. And people did point out to me that this is different, and there are some standards that do apply in this case. So I think for some of us, maybe it gets a little confusing. What happens during a holiday week? Overtime, to some extent, is an issue. But going forward, I think what maybe we need to understand is a better understanding overall of what's a work week, what maybe happens on holidays. And I understand that someone probably is on call, Bill or someone else here at the district, and so perhaps just because you're on call, then maybe you get a half day, maybe you get a full day. But I was in shock over a Thanksgiving week. I think if someone looked at that time card itself, then you'd understand the question. Thank you.
Two other issues we found that we had concerns over time cards. One, on a number of them, they were not signed by the employee or a member of management. Two, most of the time, strictly 8 was written in. No in time, no out time, no lunch time, which opens the district up to a prior employee coming and saying, I worked all these days, here's copies of my time cards, they never let me take lunch. You know, and to me, that's an issue. Because you'll lose that case, and they get waiting time. And that gets very expensive, potentially. So we'd like to see the time cards change to reflect, you know, proper for the employee, but protection for the district.
Well, standard. We just need to have some basis of a standard so that there's no, well, let's say there's no room for complaint.
You know, we went off your records, what we've been told here, and at one time there was 21 people working here, right? Is that what?
There's a big number.
That's what we come up with, is what we were told. 21 people, and now you're down to
7.
3 or 4, whatever, as far as the field. Now, somebody must have been making some big bucks just to be hanging around. And it's just total waste. It's total waste. If you can look at it 1 year and see how you get by on 1 year expenses, how would you do your house? How would you do your bank book at home? You kind of know where it's going to go every month, don't you? So why is there such a loss here?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that took my breath away when the public was talking to the previous board and asking these questions and asking why, and the manager wasn't even showing up to the meetings, and with a straight face, they were suggesting that they had done us no wrong, and I think that that's not the case.
We proved that.
They failed the district at every level
Well,
with respect to that.
In the reality, manager didn't show up, should not get paid.
And what's tragic about the whole thing is, and I don't know how much of it's just spilled milk, and how much we can mop up or wring out or extract some sort of remedy for the district, but that's what I would be hoping would be somehow.
One last thing to look into.
Actually, I'm supposed to finish my sentence before you cut me, just as a matter of practice, but.
Well, courtesy to my apologies.
All right. Scott McVeigh.
One other thing we discovered was one employee got 5 raises in 1 year, and they're working under an MOU, and they're allowed 1. So we'd like to know why there were 5. And it sounds like it's an abuse.
Yeah, and so this is, I wrote down personnel committee needs to see how the MO addresses this list of things now. There's one more, so I've got overtime, snow days, improper sharing of vacation, deductions, manager charging the whole Thanksgiving at 10 hours, no sign cards, no diary, no time started and ended on the time card, no lunch showed on the time card, and then this last one was
5 raises in 1 year.
5 raises in 1 year. Wow, that's the cherry on the
Yeah.
cherry on top.
Never had a job like that.
Double.
One of the things we wanna know is, did the board approve those raises during that calendar year? Not you guys weren't here.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's one of the things we need to know at the minutes or whatnot. If they were approved, we'd like to know why someone was approved for 5 raises in 1 year. I'm not sure there's any industry that does that. I can see a bonus maybe at the end of the year, but
I also want to add in on the, having a time in and a time out is what if there's a workers' comp claim and you have a shady employee who actually really got hurt on off work hours, but they said, oh, well, I worked my 8 hours that day. You don't know when I clocked in, when I clocked out.
ooh, that has happened here.
Valid point.
That's
Valid.
How do you know?
That's a good
Yeah. Yeah, I think I heard a board member mention that when that was raised, when it was brought up early on, I think it must have been October, maybe it was November last year, December, when things were really lively. It was, we didn't want to micromanage the manager. That was shocking to hear, because the board has a fiduciary responsibility to check with the.
That's why they're called directors, not sit-backers.
Yeah, those two.
You two are lucky.
All right.
You have clean hands so far.
So, I'd like to, if that's it, I'd like to not get too much, lots of this seems like a personnel committee issue, although there's definitely a financial tie, so I'm comfortable taking that as part of the testimony today, certainly.
Yeah.
And, this should, and we are short one person on the personnel committee, and, to help with that, Murray Miller was on the personnel committee with Chairman Trenry.
Right.
And I think that committee's gonna need some support before it takes on these issues, but we can chase them from the financial committee. I think we will continue to chase them from a financial perspective, just so we get some traction and some clarity and hopefully some understanding and satisfaction at the end.
Transparency.
Satisfaction at the end of this.
So we can certainly, I mean, it looks like, the definition of the finance committee and that to look at, the correctness and whatever, I forget exact words, but yeah, I think that we could fit it under that, and some of this stuff sounds like I said, at least going forward, it's just procedural, change the procedure, you have to have a log-in, log-out time, and that, some of these definitely need to be looked at. Some of them, like overtime or time card errors, stuff like that, that's almost impossible to go back and say there's something really wrong here.
If it's every day though.
Well, like I said, your example where it was every day,
Yeah.
that can get,
And starting times that are 5 hours earlier than the MOU calls for.
Okay.
And in that emergency
Once in a while, I
situation.
understand, but every day.
Sounds like there might be some, yeah,
Consistent,
that's
that's
questionable
okay.
for sure.
It's pretty obvious that when a person gives herself a raise during the middle of their time here, there's several raises, and they give it to themselves, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
The two veterans that sit right there where you're sitting are the guilty party of what's going
We
on.
go that way. But you were invited to come to the community committee.
Flat out.
I did that last board meeting, and we can have for you some of that payroll stuff that we're talking about, if you'd like. We can make copies of it, or you can dig it all out yourself. But we've done the legwork for you.
Well, could you just bring it to the finance committee when we have our next meeting?
Well, when's that gonna be?
I don't know,
We can do that. We were gonna present it at this last.
Let me check my
board.
calendar.
I would like to get you
Or if
the
we could
documentation.
present it at the board, yeah, that would be.
Present, yeah, I'd really like to, and you've heard this now a couple different times, I'd really like to keep the workshopping to the standing committees and the board meetings to just business where we're just making it, hashing out the last of the details and making decisions.
Yeah.
So I prefer to send it forward at the next standing, finance committee here.
Okay, yeah, that,
You agree with that?
I do, just a thought here. Since, we're finance, two of us are on the financial committee and both of us are on the, steering committee.
Yeah.
So kind of wondering if we can just have a combined meeting of the two committees.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
then we
yeah,
could-
box, yeah,
Then we could, go over, the forward planning, like this, the drought supplemental, I mean, that's close to being.
That's steering.
Yeah.
And this is really, and the difference between steering and finance gets really edgy, but, you were talking about maybe having, monthly meetings until we get sort
Get a
of.
little catch up, yeah.
Get caught up on this, and that might be it. So, maybe next time we'll call it steering committee and talk about time cards as opposed to calling it finance and talking about the drought letter.
If you're willing to expand your agenda, a bit, you could hold it simultaneous, finance and steering.
Well, that's.
You would expand your agenda a little bit as well.
Either on Monday nights or Sunday or Thursday nights when Tampa Bay's playing.
What's that? What's
I
the
jest, I'm
next
not, I think, Tuesdays are generally, anytime at 6:30 generally, evenings are pretty good for me. So Fridays aren't so good. Okay,
So do you have a calendar? You want to set a date for the next meeting?
let's, I guess we are talking about that. Dave, do you have your calendar handy? You've got it just locked down in your head.
I'm retired, so.
Just throw a dart, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
So, I have a question. Where do we go from here on these items that you listed, 1, 2, 5? Do you have a projection as to when you're gonna clarify that, or get it in order, or what's the plan?
At this point in time, like I said, we are, talked it over with Bill and I'm doing a little bit of work on it and trying to get out of it as much of it as I can, but, some of this stuff, like I said, it pretty much gonna have to, well, we need to get the authorization for, an expanded audit. And is, part of, getting the adjustments booked, is gonna be tied up in that.
Do you have somebody in mind?
I would assume we would use, the new, firm we hired for the audit.
Are they the ones that's been on?
No.
Or is
No.
that, okay,
It's
thank
a
you.
different-
Fresh blood.
Thank you.
So I have a question on, when was the last time that everything was good, the way it needed to be good with the books? Do we know?
The last time it was at least reasonable would have been 2018.
Or 2016?
Yeah, you guys wouldn't know.
Yeah, I didn't look back past 20.
Our historian is not here tonight.
Yeah. But at least in 2018,
Sandy.
they booked in the adjustments.
And do we have easy access, no, maybe that's the wrong way to say it. For wherever the information is stored, whoever did it last and did it correctly, do you have easy access to be able to get those records?
They would be, yeah, they'd be pulling a trial balance.
Be nice at some point to be able to go back and at least connect to
Yeah.
some solid ground.
Yeah.
And then see what happens going forward.
Well, like I said, at least 2018, they're complete set of books. After that, they're not.
But it sounds like the problems go farther back than that.
You take a look at the reserve accounts in 2016, they were reasonable, and then they just notified after that.
Did they have the sub-ledgers and all that, like, at that point?
I'm sure they did.
Had to.
But again, like I said, I didn't look past 2019 because I didn't have an audit report or anything else to try to do anything with. And when I started out, all I was going to do was see if the water receivable was cleaned up and if we had the records in the condition for the auditors to look at. And it expanded significantly.
The one word that I think is appropriate for us all here is the willingness for us to go a little bit further than what was expressed by two members of the board, where there was an unwillingness to look at some of these issues. So we're having a nice calm meeting, and the only word that I was gonna suggest, because you went pretty far, Cedric, with what you had said.
What'd I say?
Oh, you said.
Sometimes talk
And-
wildly off the top of my head.
The word that I think we're all looking for is the willingness, and we can understand that this is gonna take some time. And Dave, what you've made clear is that you've hit a wall with regards to being able to look past a certain point easily, and that's why now what we're gonna do is we're gonna figure out how to, I believe, you might have said to request money, so that we can actually dig a little deeper into the records.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's fair.
You know, and,
Is there money to request?
well, you can request anything, whether it's
You're not gonna get it every time.
The finance is just making ends meet as we crawl out of the hole here. That's gonna create some of that timing issue, but, we'll keep an eye on what the cost would be, to add, some of these other items to the expanded testing and try to make it happen, as efficiently as we can on as short a timeline as we can. To
Thank
try-
you.
Yeah. I think
Thanks.
yeah. But I don't know what the timeline is.
That's fine.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, the timeline is getting the thing. Would you recommend or consider recommending possibly another entity doing this audit other than the current audit company, especially if you find someone around who has a background in doing this type of audit?
Well,
Especially throughout this region.
okay, so, well,
Hey,
okay, part of the
I have a lot
thing
of faith in that.
is that if we use the same auditors that are gonna do the financial, then a lot of the stuff they're doing will make the financial audit go smoother and we can hopefully save money, we can talk a little bit a lower rate on that. The other thing is, if they are specialists in government, then they probably know how to do these because, when I was auditing, I did government. So we do some where somebody calls you to come in, like the school district, and we do, you do the funding and then you do the fun stuff, the sources and uses and whatever. But if they're doing government, then because there's enough stuff going on in the government with government funding, they know how to do this stuff.
Okay. Still would be a bad idea to get a couple of estimates maybe.
We could.
Anytime we hire somebody, we're gonna wanna know what the dollars and cents are ahead of time. If things don't look like they're within the bounds of reasonableness, we will send out RFPs for, we're gonna shop the market, for sure.
Now, if you do a forensic audit that is, say you pick out a couple of things, not a complete on everything in here,
Correct.
but you found the problems areas.
Correct.
Okay. Is it gonna be less expensive for us in the beginning, just to focus on those?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Because, you know, like I said, if you go in on the sources and uses where you don't know where the money came from, or
Right.
where it went, then you spend weeks, months trying to figure out what the heck you don't, you know, what you need to look at.
right, yeah,
You don't want weeks and months.
no,
You
no.
want the stuff out there for the auditor to
Right.
review.
Do you have to bring your proposals now to the board and they have to approve it?
Yes.
Yes, we.
Okay, now we're sitting with a 4-member board.
The
And I
fifth
could
one next
see,
meeting.
okay, well, I could see a 2-2 split at this point. You don't think that'll happen?
I think that we'll have a 4-0, actually. I think that you've just seen a sea change, it's just a willingness to go along with what's, I think it's a typical behavior that you would have seen 3 years ago, just going along with the vote, going along with the vote, going along with the vote. And when you were seeing the resistance to suggestions, there was other people resisting, and so members resisted. So my guess is that we wouldn't have any trouble convincing.
It'll be important that that fifth person,
Not that it needs convincing, but I think there's gonna be enough facts there and support from the public that they'll be compelled. And, yeah, and for good reason.
Now, you know how long it's been push and shove? Long time. You were on the other side of the fence not too long ago. So,
Going forward, do you feel confident in the person, we're going back and backwards, the bookkeeping wasn't done correctly. Do you feel confident in the bookkeeper that is taking on the Clear Creek Water District to do what needs to be done for us?
I have no reason to not be confident that she's, working with Centerville.
Centerville as well, yeah.
Which is, looks like they run a pretty tight ship there.
Okay, okay. But have you looked at any of her reports?
I've only looked at a couple of things.
Okay. I was just wondering if you were requesting monthly reports from her. She should be able to provide those to you. as a
Right, well, like I
request.
said, she sent out an email that says, you know, I've closed the book, so I've done this and this and this.
Does she need any help with anything that anybody could help?
I would try to have it.
the bookkeepers.
Yeah, they have their system probably. I just wanted to make sure that you were able to look at it, and from here going forward, they were to, you know,
I hear what you're saying, it's kind of a loaded question, because, again, I don't know what level of involvement, you know, I mean, if it's a day-to-day, you know, and it's running smoothly, then I don't think I should be getting in the middle of it, because it's just interfering.
right, but still we should have, because she's an outsource, and I know this of other, like doctor's offices and things like that, you can't wait a whole year and then look at your P&Ls. You need to have a monthly observation what's going on.
Right.
Okay.
Well, like I said, we can, you know, when she's finished with it, then I run the trial balance, and I look, and, you know, so, I mean, I may not be sitting in her chair, but I'm looking at her shoulder.
No. But I mean, we don't wanna wait a whole
No,
year
no,
then.
I review the trial balance.
Okay. That's really good.
By the way, thank you for looking into that,
Yes.
what you found so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know that was very encouraging to me.
Yeah, before we set a date for the combined standing committees, the finance and steering committee meeting, and I have a date in my mind, I would like to thank Dave for his efforts that you came forward in our time of need, and we selected you, and then now you're contributing significant time and effort to helping correct our financial woes. So certainly my appreciation to you for that. I'd like to share publicly.
I thought I was going to be doing writing some reports and maybe a couple of procedures. I didn't think I was going to get involved in this. I might not have.
Make you nervous?
Yeah, you didn't read the fine print. Okay, well, that's fantastic. So the date I'd like to suggest for a combined meeting would be November 23rd, which is
Just before Thanksgiving.
2 days before Thanksgiving. We'll all be in a good mood.
We'll be in Maui.
Wow, there we go. I'm sorry to hear that. You
I know.
sure you don't want to make the meeting?
Probably not.
If that works for you all, it's be about a month. That's a Tuesday.
Okay.
Tuesdays feel pretty good. Mondays, not so good. Fridays, no. I get the meeting down on Wednesday, Thursdays, so generally speaking. Is that, Kristen, you got that? As well. All right, so the next item on our agenda is the drought and supplemental water program. And for just some context for everyone, the drought and water rate was developed by the CAC because there was discussions during those meetings about how the district would be able to afford water in years where the district was curtailed. We were kicking around ideas about an additional monthly fee to try to create a pool of money that then would be set separately aside, and then it could be utilized going into a drought year to acquire additional water, so that we could add that to our curtailed amount, our surface water that we get from the Bureau, and the well water, and have some pool of water that's reasonably it's a reasonable amount for the customers. And that sounded kind of shaky in terms of, A, how much should you put aside? B, how many years in a row are you gonna have a drought? And C, currently at the time, we were like, well, I'm not sure that the district holding a bunch of extra money is a good idea, just because they had a history of squandering it. So we came up with the idea that we would have a drought rate, which would be based on the district going out and purchasing water, and the district could purchase from any number of willing sellers. That would come with it a price per acre foot, and the drought rate formula integrated that and broke it into then 100 cubic feet, and then based on how much volume for each water source and the cost of each acre foot of water, a proportionally weighted drought rate would be calculated. It was envisioned that drought rate would get established early in the year when the Bureau indicates that we're going to have a drought year, for example, which they did send a letter or email, mastergram is how Bill characterized it, that we would be curtailed next year as well. So we already have an indication that we're going to be in a drought rate kind of situation. The strength of the drought rate proposal, the drought rate formula, is that and part of what this document tries to do is signal to folks, signal to the board that the expectation is that, you know, under the purpose that during drought years, the district will go out and buy or try to secure additional water in an equitable and to the maximum extent feasible. So equitable meaning the district is gonna be shopping for everybody because we all want a piece of it, and people that would be on the outside looking in and be upset if we didn't. And the extent feasible is speaking towards, well, we don't know how much water is gonna be available from a seller's perspective, right? We can all think that we're gonna go buy 3,000 acre feet of Pecama water, and that may already be spoken for. I mean, I don't know how their water portfolio is sorted out on a yearly basis. In years past, we've been able to secure some, so I would anticipate to some extent we should be able to secure some in the future. The other piece of this is that it sort of sets a time frame that the board will be looking for trying to satisfy the district's water needs and shopping for that water early in the season, because you don't want to be last in line. What's great about the drought rate is that the district doesn't have to worry about, and customers, if you're worried about keeping the district financially whole, you don't have to worry that the district will purchase water and then not be able to recoup it in its monthly rates, because the drought rate states, and the water rate proposal stated that when the district goes out and shops for that water, that rate is developed, and that will be the water rate for everybody for that year, which is fair enough.
Except, I'm sorry, you did indicate that you could change that rate with a 30-day notice, either up or down.
That's correct, because if you were, for example, that provides flexibility for the district, and I wouldn't anticipate this, but for example, this year, if the district, the board of directors, district, whatever, through its meetings decided, well, we have an appetite for 2,000 acre feet of water, excess water that we're gonna go purchase, and we do, and then for some reason, demand goes higher than that, in the drought year, you know, there's pieces to this that's a little bit, I don't fully understand, but because during drought years, the state generally demands that you conserve to some degree, so it's sort of counterintuitive that you purchased excess water that would meet a normal water year's demand, and then you would need to go buy more in a drought. But setting that aside, if you did have to buy some additional water, you could make that adjustment. You could anticipate that sale, make that adjustment, and that extra water would be integrated into the proportional rate, which is super fair, great way to go about it. And then there's this concept of supplemental water. So what's supplemental water? That would be that after the board of directors goes out and shops for water to the extent that it feels necessary to satisfy the vast majority of customers. I don't know what that number is, 90%, 85%, but there's water demand in this district that goes from a huge amount to very little, even in a drought. So when we go to shop for water, we're gonna have to go shop for water that's gonna satisfy to the maximum extent practical, higher, maybe it's the modal range of customers, who the most frequent use, I don't know what the number is. And I say that you're only gonna satisfy a certain proportion of the customers, because if you notice, if you played with the drought rate numbers, the formula, as you buy more water and it gets progressively more expensive, it will drive the individual unit price of water up. And if you're a customer that doesn't use a lot of water, who would say, well, gosh, you don't need to shop for that much water and drive my water rate up to $1.50 a unit, because I only need 2 units a month, whereas that person needs, an acre foot in July. Don't do that, because you're driving up, it drives the whole water rate up. It's incremental, so I'm not as concerned about that. I think from a board's perspective, I I would encourage the board, at least from my perspective, I don't know how the others would vote, to shop for the maximum quantity available, because the difference between $1.33 and $1.38, and everybody gets all their water at $1.38 versus $1.33. I just don't think there's much in it. If you're not using a lot of water, your water rate, if you use 10, I don't want to do the math too fast, Mr. McVeigh, but that's going to be going from like 12 minutes. It's going from 12 something to 13 something. So whereas if you forego that extra 500 acre feet, the folks with animals and stuff will go, wow, you're killing me, because that water's not available. The supplemental water program is trying to walk a line in between the two, which would mean you'd shop for less for the district as a whole, and then have a program where the big water users would come in and just simply put money up for the district or essentially secure the water through fully funding the water purchase for amounts that they feel are necessary to satisfy their water needs. Great idea, because you're going to drive the average price down for most of the customers that don't have that big demand, and then the excess cost of buying more expensive water would be put on folks with the highest demand. So if you read, for example, supplemental water, if you read the first paragraph, last sentence, supplemental water purchases will be subservient to the drought water purchases being satisfied. That means that it was my intention when I wrote it that way, that the board would shop for all the customers first. They would secure water at the best rate for all the customers. And when that rate that's satisfied, and we can give each customer potentially 75 units a month, or whatever that magic number is, and we'll talk about that, but there's going to be some average, right? Because when we took the quantity of water the wells could provide, we divided by the total customers, we end up with 29. Well, we would do that with, we'd have the well water in, we'd have the supplemental water, the surface water in, and whatever drought water that we purchased, we had this pool of water. We could divide that by all the folks and figure out where that number was. And if it was a good number for everybody, then we wouldn't, the board wouldn't feel compelled to buy more water. If that number wasn't big enough, that's where the supplemental water would come in, and they would shop whatever water's available then on the open market, which potentially could be higher than, say, if we bought McConnell water for all the customers, which tends to be cheaper. We bought all that's available, and that happened to satisfy the district. And the folks that want more water said, well, we need the supplemental water program. They start putting in their applications, and we can see that there's 500 acre feet more they want to go get. Well, then they might be buying city ready more, which might be a little bit more, but they would be buying it, and we would have a mechanism for them to buy it, and that. There's a couple of legal issues with this that I'm not clear on, and so I don't want to overpromise any of this, and that's why I kind of like the idea of the district shopping aggressively for the whole district and getting a pool of water that we feel like we can get through the year on. Is that 3,300 acre feet? That's kind of a typical number. Or is it, if we could buy it, just go ahead and do that, and we end up with a $1.38, and everybody lives with a $1.38, or whatever the number is. I'm just speculating. But if we choose to include the supplemental water issue, our lawyer has suggested that creates a different class of customer, and you're not treating all the customers the same, although, I don't know, we're giving everyone the same opportunity, and I would argue that if the district shopped hard for a decent pool of water, I don't know that the class of customer that we, in theory, be harming would be harmed, because they probably don't use that much water anyways, and the proportional allocation would satisfy their needs. So that's just some of the thinking I have around that. What else?
Well, my concern with the supplemental water is that you're asking the agricultural users to make a deposit so that they can pay more for the water than everyone else is paying for it. And like I said, at that level, it just doesn't make any sense.
So let me give you, if I can, some background on that. One of the reasons the board did not approve back in February, my suggestion of going out and getting some water from McConnell was, back in 2016, they bought 1,000 acre feet. The district cut way back and they didn't use it all, but the board was obligated to pay for all that water. By allowing the customers who have a higher use, and Cedric, you said it at 100 HCF, which to me makes sense because there are people with landscaping and gardens who will use more than 40 or 50 or whatever HCFs a month. And this then precludes having to figure out a way to pay for the water because anybody who wishes to purchases that water. Okay, take the deposit out of the picture, but if you bought McConnell at $2.50 an acre foot, which is, per unit is 57.47 cents per unit. Administrative costs, round that to 60. Now you have approximately 2.5 cents, which runs about $11 an acre foot, enabling you to hire a interim staff personnel to come in for 3 to 5 days, do all the administrative entries into the system, taking the burden off of our staff. You've got the money up front to pay for that additional water. You don't have to worry about where's the money coming from. And you don't run the risk of buying more than the district uses. Because, well, as an example, was it 2016, 2,600 plus acre feet were used for agricultural back then. Orchards, irrigated pastures, etc. I was one of those customers. And I bought about 1 acre foot a month. Okay, so Irwin's concerned, obviously, because he has the history. We bought the 1,000 acre feet. We didn't use it all. We still had to pay for the full 1,000 acre feet. By getting customers who are willing to pay up front for this water at $2.50, or whatever it is, based on figuring out a formula. Then your distribution charge, which currently is 27 cents per HCF, is on their bill also every month. So they get the normal base rate with its add-ons, and no matter how many units they've used, the water they've already purchased, they still have to pay that filtration, distribution, and whatnot. Okay, and that's how that would be accounted for. So everything balances that way. You've got the water money up front. There's no risk of not using it. You purchase 500, 1,000 acre feet from McConnell for the district as a whole. And then the rest of the customers come in and say, look, I want an extra 2, 3, 5, 10 acre feet, and I'm willing to pay the $2.50 or whatever it is per acre foot up front. Here's my check. There were people who were willing to do that in March and April. Okay.
Yeah, so love to hear some more comments from other folks. You understand on this idea? Joanna, shoot, just here, faster.
Me or somebody else?
You, please. Joanna.
We were one of the people that wanted to purchase extra water because of our landscaping. We don't have animals, so, but it was to keep our landscaping alive. We got told that it wasn't equitable and a lot of other things, which legally I just do not understand the concept of the equitably, whatever that
Equitability.
Say it again?
Yeah, we know what you're trying to say.
Equability of the concept, because some people don't need the water. So why are we, people that, something about can't afford it. If you can't afford it, you probably don't need it.
Or you're probably not using it anyways.
Yeah, so, so I like the idea of the supplemental water. We would be very willing to pay ahead for it, knowing that we would have enough water to keep our landscaping alive, our 20-year-old redwoods alive, so yes, we would definitely be in favor of that.
And would you be in favor of the district securing enough water that you also had enough water?
Yeah, absolutely.
So through like a drought rate?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The risk is the board purchases too much and still has to pay for it though.
Well, there's ways of managing that, and it could be that, for example, just the cooperative nature of the different entities locally this last year it's just been a sea change, I guess, in terms of their willingness to, it wasn't a take or pay type contracts, it's use and pay. So you would secure this amount, and you pay as you go in terms of how much you would get through. We also have the issue with, we have the well water that we can meter out, so we can use the surface water that we've secured first and in quantities to get us through, and we can use that up and then leave a proportion of the surface to go with the well waters to carry us through the rest of the year. But we'd be spending those cards, we'd be spending our surface water cards first, through the early part of the year, summer, and then as the water year waned, you tapped out on your surface water and then you drawing more on your well water, or some mix there in between. That's what the district manager gets to do, is manipulate that. But I think with the way the contracts were formed last year, I would expect the same sort of contract this year, the subsequent year. So there is a bit of risk, but we'll see. We have
I was gonna say what Jack's got.
Jackie.
I was just saying, in some of our community meetings, and I don't see either one of them here, but we had that, I forget his name, the retired engineer with the cattle and the horses. And then we had the other two that had a lot of cattle, and they were willing to pay for their water ahead, because they've had to sell off animals this year, and some of them use it for income, and this year they've lost a lot of money. This year.
Personally, I would probably buy 100 a month.
Just 100 acre feet a month?
Well,
HC.
right, right.
Come on now. Ante up. Let's get to an acre
We
foot.
buy 100.
Okay, so all right, and then next we're gonna.
They come back to me because I
We'll come back to you.
Not 91.
Okay.
That's
I
fine.
have some points I want to make.
Yeah, I'd like to
Some
say something.
concerns.
Wait, David.
All right, this thing says 100 feet, but when we were talking to Bill, he's saying
Yeah, it needs to be
minimum
substantially
of
more.
half an acre foot, because the administration on going down to 100 feet would be disastrous.
Is he talking the cost of input into the system?
If you want to purchase supplemental, it has to be in increments of a half acre foot or more.
Most districts do it by the acre foot. But if you wanted 100 HCF a month, and you're
I'll
gonna be
pay for
doing
it.
5, then you're looking at an acre foot invoice.
Right, exactly,
So-
so that's
Yeah.
fine for me.
We have, what's your name?
Chuck Jones.
Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones' turn.
When we started this, I remember Aaron Fuss saying what we were gonna do was that we were gonna have a pool of money and we were gonna be able to conserve water. That was the premise. That's how we started. The unfortunate part was that we burned through the water immediately. After we burned through that water, we were still in a position where people were unwilling to conserve water. So that this lady and her husband didn't have water that was available if what we could do was to control it. That problem is not going to go away, and that was fully demonstrated this year. Then, what she very accurately described was to be upset, to take away, let's say, the penalties, to have a penalty structure that's effective. So if what the board's able to settle on is something with regards to supplemental water, which is specific, so that we don't have any type of repeat as we had this year, where you described accurately that we've got this huge difference between people who use water, people who don't use water. That's not going to go away. So legally, I guess at some point, what really hits right down the middle is if we wind up in this situation again, how are we gonna control water use? Because people are gonna do what they're gonna do, and I'm not even convinced that the supplemental water is gonna do much. So, there is no simple answer.
Well, you'd have this year, the board was in disarray, and they didn't get a drought ordinance in place soon enough to get some sort of structure, and the finances were wrecked, but, yeah, next year, we're gonna need to pass a drought ordinance, in my opinion, pretty damn early in the year, when we know how much water there is, and the other thing that's outstanding that I don't have a solution to right now is, if we went out and purchased some sum of water, and we have this pool of water, say it's 3,000 acre feet, I don't think that the proportional distribution of the water makes sense from a customer perspective, just because doesn't reflect the water use behavior of the demographic customers in the district. So I'm thinking to myself, we don't have a good history of, I guess we can do some forensic looking back in 2018 and try to create some kind of a water use demand schedule by customer account, to do that anonymously, and figure out what 85% of that demand was, and see if that, and maybe that's how we develop our target for what we go out and buy for the drought rate, so that everyone's satisfied, and then maybe we throw in a couple hundred acre feet on the side, but
It was past
that's
use.
a hole that we have to get figured out.
But it was always past use. That's what we always had.
Yeah, that's
Any
what I'm
of the previous
suggesting.
events, it was past
Yep.
use. So there was a lot less, let's say, of an issue with regards to how we were gonna control, usage. I think there was more of a willing to conserve. And what was so unfortunate was that it took so long before the Bureau finally cut us all the way down to 25%, that it was after the fact. And that was something that I wanted to say at the last meeting, was that, we did our due diligence with regards to looking for water. We sort of knew that we had a problem. We started early on in the year. And then what happens, they jerked the rug out from underneath us late in the game. We knew it was coming, but they hadn't jerked the rug out till it was over.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that comes to my mind that we have to remember though is, what about those that have not been able to pay, or have not paid their water bill? To put on these penalty fees for those of us who are paying, it's like to try to cover costs of those who are not paying, and there seems to be such a larger standing amount financially speaking that we may never recover of that to try and use the rest of us to fill in financially speaks mud to me.
I agree 100%. We're gonna have to deal with that next year.
I mean-
Or sooner than that. We're gonna get arrears, but I agree. Because there's no sense, the district, I believe, and we'll have to do a little vote on this, but my opinion is, speaking as one, is that those customers should be constrained to some nominal amount of water a month. They're not gonna not have water to cook or drink, because that's state law, but they shouldn't have just an open meter. Choose what you want.
So it's like the first amount, if I recall correctly, that I was hearing in August or September was an amount of like $210,000. And then it seemed like the latest amount I heard was a little over $100,000. And I don't know if we're dealing with two totally separate things that are going on, or what's up, but and I know that we were talking, it was mentioned about a fund for the 2020 pandemic thing on those who had not received money to be able to pay their bills, to be able to file in for that. Of course, I don't recall hearing anything more about that. But you just can't go and throw fees at people who are actually paying their bill, because I'm looking at this and I go, we received over $400 on our water bill. Yeah. And it just, my parents should be retired and very careful about their finances, but we have an outstanding thing of $210,000.
Yeah,
Actually,
agreed.
31.
Just an idea, thought process.
Name?
Caitlin, Patrick. We obviously don't know what necessarily the drought ordinance will be next year. We don't know what the penalty structure is going to be next year, if there is going to be one. Whether there's variances or protests, again, we don't know, because it might not be the exact same that we had this year, because obviously that was a fiasco situation, but whatever. So if we go through with having a supplemental water program, I go by my acre feet for the year, but Scott doesn't buy any acre feet, and so he's just gonna run off district water, whatever's procured. If he goes over and he pays his regular bill, but he doesn't pay his penalty, applies for a variance, come towards the end of our water high usage, so October, they could then reevaluate how much water's left, approve his variance or deny his variance, and then he can still pay his penalty at a later date, because the option is still there currently for this water year, whatever, that.
I'm trying to follow you.
Sorry, it works in my little autistic head. That, you know, if you pay your regular bill now, but you don't pay your penalty because you're waiting on the approval of the variance or the protest, or because you're paying $1,000 penalty, you're making payments on it. What if in May Scott goes over and he didn't buy supplemental water and he has a penalty? If they just hold off that variance approval until, say, October, November, and then reevaluate it saying, oh, well, we still have all this extra water. He's not in trouble for going over. Yeah, he went over, but we still have plenty of water in the district that, you know, he's not a bad kid. So he's sitting.
That'd be good. That'd be goodwill water.
Well,
Yes,
but I
Just be
mean,
out there to.
yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, there'd be a bonus. There'd be a bump there or some.
I'd be taking advantage of the situation.
you're still stuck
Brandon
with
in
the
the back,
bill.
and then you, Joanne.
I just wanna clarify this. If I was to buy 4 to 5 acre foot, say for instance, and I use that for the year, now, how is that gonna be if I secured that, am I willing to use all that? Or if it's available? Say for instance, I personally did 5 acre feet.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanna know if I put the money up front for that and say, for instance, something happened, we had breaks in the pipeline and on.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's
that-
right.
Yeah, and that.
That's right, you're all,
that
you're all,
5 acre feet
I forget
isn't
about
there. I'm gonna
Don't
say,
forget.
I want my 5 acre feet because I need to water my pastures instead of go buy high hay prices.
incredibly awkward. Incredibly awkward, because there's the, and
I'm just.
yeah, and if you think about, this is a community service district, so we're all in it together. We all maintain our own meter, we all we all maintain the staffing to our base rate, and we pay for our water and the infrastructure through the water rates, et cetera. And we all pay when the lines break, and our surface water runs all over the ground, that's
That
nice and
happens a
cheap.
lot.
Yeah, and so, that's is supplemental water exempt from line breakage? I mean, I think people would say, well, shit, you know. Yeah. Because it would, but how would you calculate the proportional quantity of, I mean, that would be really uncomfortable. And that
It's easy to
circles me back to, the note to myself is to do a past use analysis on water use to develop percent usage, to determine the total water to procure, and then apply that water to the lump sum and float that to people in terms of if that's enough. I would really prefer to run this through the drought rate and not have this supplemental program. I would, because of those sorts of complications, and what's the price of the administrative cost? And then there's a wrinkle relative to our contract with the Bureau and other water agencies that during a drought, there's water availability gets constrained to public health and safety in a lot of instances. So if we procure water under the auspices of providing public health and safety, sell water to someone that owns a pond and they just fill their pond, which is not something that you would do during a drought. And the Bureau and other water purveyors would say, what the hell? We're not gonna, you know, that puts us in a very, I think, not a very tenable position as a water agency, because we all kind of have to play ball during drought. So that's my druthers at this point. Welcome to hear more. And Jackie.
Yeah. Do we have any idea of how many acre feet to date has been lost through pipes and breakages? That would be a nice number to know.
I don't know. I don't know.
There's a certain way that we calculate unallocated water,
Yeah,
but it's hard to know if it's leaking out of one of the ponds of the filter plant, or kind of, it's hard to necessarily break it down to where exactly it's going.
yeah.
But there is a spreadsheet.
Because you can compare usage against the water that comes through the dam or
That's
some
right.
other
Right.
source, and there's a difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
How big a number is that?
It's a very, very wide range.
Yeah, tragic.
But
I know.
I can,
That's why we should qualify for drought resiliency grants, because if you got a district like ours, and nobody, the government, the state doesn't want to see water users, you know, suffer, and they certainly don't want to see water squandered. If you're having breaks in your district that are amounting to significant amounts of water, those sorts of leaks need to get plugged, and I think we qualify. And I think Dave, I think that Bill has sought some of that grant funding out, so. The good news is that the state had a massive budget overrun. Now, if we can just keep them from spending it on things before they do good things with it.
Have we approached our legislators?
Behind you, what's your name?
Sally?
Sally has a chance to speak now. Sally.
Well, I was thinking, if you already know that we're going into a drought, maybe you should be hitting it home as far as on your reports every month with our bill, making it apparent to everybody, you know. I mean, we had the inkling, but nothing really came hitting home until August, you know, or, you know, a little bit sooner than that, but just started now. And then this whole thing with this supplemental water, what kind of accounting problem are we gonna have on this? You know, I mean, this is, sounds like a nightmare, and then all the other people that, like say, people that grow pot and everything, you know, they're gonna use, you know, they're gonna have a chance to abuse all the supplemental water. How do you control it? It's not like you put 100 acre feet in our backyard.
Yeah, those are all valid questions, and I don't have answers for any, except that the idea of better communication with district customers about the status of the district roads, water supplies, I think is an important element. And I'm always counseled that when I go home, that the district should be putting things attached to the water bill where they look for their bill and the money, because that's what's looked at, not anything else that's attached. They will look for the bill and have it in bold letters near that point. And I don't know, that all has to get, I don't know how you do that. That sounds like staff work. And we're trying to minimize that. But good point, Sally, thank you. Joanna, you have a question?
On the supplemental water, when this was first done, the agreements that you were foreseeing would be fixed. You know, you have to buy, you know, you buy this much and we don't care whether you use it or not. But the stuff we've got with Reading and some of these allow us to, you know, you get up to 700, and you only get charged for what you're using, which, you know, so part of the reason for, I believe, for developing the supplemental was because we didn't want to be in a position where we bought something and then didn't use it. But with the agreements we have with Reading, if you don't use it, you don't pay for it. So some of the impetus goes out of this, I would think.
One of the reasons.
That's really encouraging. Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, that's a good point, Dave.
One of the reasons for it though was McConnell sells at $2.50. Even with the transfers and whatnot, you're getting 404 at your better price. That's $154 more per acre foot because of the transfer fees and things are right on. The first 500 acre
through the
feet from
city
the city
of Reading,
Reading, and $134 in transfer fees from ACID. And we gave them all that money
Well, that
per
doesn't,
acre foot,
when
plus
the,
the transfer fees and
when the
other
district
fees
goes to
tacked on.
shop for water, they can go to McConnell and ask for surface water, and that wouldn't have a transfer fee.
That's correct.
All the other water we go to shop for is gonna be plus,
That's right.
which is one of the issues that Dave raised about the inequity that ag users could say that, well, the district should be shopping for all of us, not just getting the cheap water for the domestic customers, if I heard you correctly, and
That's
then
exactly
saddling
right.
the ag folks with the most expensive water, which I don't know that that's a big cry in your teacup over, because by the time you get it to a,
Yeah, because if you can get cheap water from McConnell, it has to go to the district first. It wouldn't be, that wouldn't be the basis for your supplemental. I said, my problem is, I said, I come from an agricultural background, but, you know, this looks like, you know, it's charging more to the agricultural users than if they didn't make the deposit up front. That's what I kind of had problem wrapping my head around.
yeah.
This enables them to purchase a quantity of water they feel is sufficient to get through the drought.
Yes, but they're purchasing at a very high rate. And
Well-
so why do we have I mean, the district is supposed to take care of all of its customers, you know?
Yeah, that's where
I
that-
just don't
it's-
see, you're throwing the agricultural, you know,
So,
the ag users to.
Let me make a couple of points to that. Purchase water from McConnell for the district as a whole. Bump from that 29 to 45 to 65, whatever you feel is appropriate. But for the customer who wants the additional 50 to 100 or whatever per month, allow them to purchase that so that they know that their garden or their redwood trees or their cattle aren't gonna die.
As
That's
long
the
as they know
purpose
that
of
they're going
that.
to be paying a huge premium for that.
No, and you buy from the same source. So if the district feels that 500 additional acre feet from McConnell will satisfy the needs of the average user, whatever that metric is, then you tack on and you allow the application to be filled out. Now you know that you're gonna be able to, there are other customers out there who wanna purchase an additional maybe 1,000 acre feet. Now you know what it's gonna be, okay? It's a known now instead of an unknown.
This takes that mystery away.
Yeah,
The administration and the accounting, it would be done by hand on an Excel spreadsheet, I don't know.
That sounds like
to do it.
Yeah,
Charge
You gotta hire
you
somebody
2.5
else for
cents
that.
per
yeah, and
unit.
so if you think about the administrative costs, and I had a outstanding question to Bill on this, was how much, how many full-time employees would it take to administrate? And so if you thought of just, maybe it's a half year. So what's a half year, you divide that into, or maybe it's only $15,000, which works out to be almost 7 cents at HFC for administrative. And the district, for sure, is not gonna underestimate that number. We are not gonna, so that, those issues are unknown, and the adventure in supplemental water, I'm not sure if it's worth chasing that if, for example, and I think if we did a forensic analysis on water use behavior from 2018 and identified how much individual customers used, and then brought 90% of that forward as a goal to purchase this next drought year, and then just reapplied that back to that water use. People that used 50 a month on average would get 50 a month. I don't, Joanne, do you have a 2018 number?
Probably 150 during the summer.
A month, okay, yeah, so you would be getting 140, maybe, I don't know, whatever 90% of that is. The ag users would get their
I used
300 or 400, yeah, but that would have been incorporated in, and then we wouldn't have this proportional distribution, the whole variance craziness. We would want to memorialize the expectation through an ordinance relative to overdraft and penalties if you do overdraft, so that we don't get in a bind like we did this year with district overdrawing surface water and putting our contract in jeopardy with the Bureau. That's how I would prefer to do that. I mean, I love the idea of the supplemental, but boy, I'd love to check that box and make it go away myself.
Could you, instead of a dollar amount, charge them a penalty per HCF of overusage?
I don't, that's only if you had an unlimited amount of water, right?
Well,
Either
you
way,
can
you
have
gotta,
customers
either
who
way, you gotta
overuse
stop
it.
the overuse.
Well,
If he,
I
whatever your
looked
metric
at
is.
some of the things that have come in the last few weeks. There are plenty of customers who are overusing, making no attempt to use only their allocations.
We have neighbors that.
Yeah. Well,
And
Bill's supposed to
so a
monitor that
proportional
for the
penalty
next
per
couple of weeks.
HCF, $2.50 an HCF, or whatever.
Yeah, Bill's gonna look at that, and he's gonna report, we're gonna have hold an emergency meeting to slam the brakes on, or not, but I don't think we're gonna need to, because I think our water situation's pretty darn good, and it's been raining. And our water rate covers that use. But yeah, that's something to monitor. We were bold at the last meeting and threw off not only went retroactive on the penalties, which I didn't think was a good idea because of the revenue hit the district took, and the message it sends to the folks that did their part in terms of constraining water. I thought that was.
Slap in the face?
You were in the same audience, this audience wanted that to happen.
Not
There was
me.
only Joanne stood up and said, and Scott mumbled a few times about how we were gonna lose money on it. But beyond that, there was consensus, well, maybe,
I think you should.
no, maybe Chuck mentioned a little bit of outrage, but he was still a little bit muted.
It's so hard to try and come up with a consensus in any of this, that I think the most important thing that you brought up, backing up a little bit, is that we figure out how we're gonna maintain our contract and not upset any agency like the Bureau with regards to how we use our water, because once we get under this drought condition, and I'm not quite sure how you walked through what you did, but you explained that we have to be careful so that in spite of how this district functions, we still satisfy how we look to the people who provide us with water. And we need to maintain our water out of whiskey tank and not jeopardize that in any manner.
That's kind of where long-term down the road, not right now, we need to think about more wells and get away from surface water and the Bureau. 'Cause
That
that's
sounds
what-
like something for next month's steering committee. Actually, a little, yeah, and I agree, but again, we're back to the timeline, champagne taste and a lemonade budget.
Calcium carbonated water, clogging up everything.
Yeah, like I said, if you're talking about wells, then you probably need to put in more booster station and larger pipes, and it's not a short-term solution. Or cheap, it isn't just the price of the well.
Grants, what are we doing on grants at this point?
That, Joanne, that would be, can we bring that up at the end of the meeting? Let's try to get to the end of this. I just like to stay focused, because there is an agenda. And that sounds sort of an open meeting. I just,
Because we're already floating.
because I think where we're at here, so by show of hands, and now there's a very small sample of customers, do you prefer the district satisfying or attempting to satisfy all the customers based on their 2018 use of water as a volume to secure for our drought rate exclusively? By a show of hands?
No.
Is that
Or-
would there be the penalties
See-
that we've already?
There's no, this doesn't involve any penalty, he's just trying to secure probably 3,400
Because I
acre
thought the
feet of water.
supplemental was instead of paying $1,000 in a fine, that $1,000 could just buy a chunk of water.
Yes.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
4
Well,
acre
that's-
feet.
See, we had,
I
like,
mean,
wait,
if you were going to develop a program based on 2018 usage or whatever, then I would assume that your fine structure would also be based on that, you know. If, say,
Yeah.
you need 300 acre feet, then you would only be fined if you were using over 300 acre feet.
Yeah,
Well,
correct.
then how much would that fine?
It would be some, that's TBD, that's TBD, to be determined. Depends how big a brake pedal you need. Do you need disc brakes, or do you need those old freaking calipers? You got the
see,
10 speeds.
my problem is we went from 30 to 105 to back down to 30, back up. So there was no balance there in 2018.
Oh,
They came to us and said, use all the water you guys want, as long as you pay for it.
Much as you can afford.
So that's what we did.
As much as you
So
can.
that was pretty wrong on the district to come in there and give us that idea that we were in good shape.
yeah.
And that's kind of what they did last year. They thought we were still in good shape. Now we're using 15 units a month. And I think that's pretty good myself, but
Maybe it'd be easier to develop a drought rate target to go shop for. Is in one of our mailings for one of the bills, we just have a little slip on there that says, write in what you think you're gonna need for the year, you know, something times 12 for the year, and we'll have a target. And we'll see if it's 8,000 acre feet or not at the end. But just in terms of, to take that mystery away a bit.
see, we could do that now. Before we couldn't do that because we didn't have any reason to save water. We used it when we were told to use it.
Yeah.
Now we use it 14 or 15 a month. That's it.
Yeah.
So
But I know that's what the scenario I just said. How much would you write down on the
Yeah.
slip?
So we know how much we use now.
What do you think you'd write down on the slip though for like
How much
next
would you
year?
want to
Depends on
use?
what you want.
Would you write down 30 then, or would you write down
What did we
16?
used to use?
Well, no, we're at 15 right now. I wouldn't. Probably
No, what?
maybe 18. I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, if we could shop for water, and I don't know how much we can buy. That's the other thing. But if we were shopping for water, it'd be kind of like Santa Claus. You're your own Santa Claus. You're right
But
in
why
that.
couldn't you take an average of multiple years? So the years that everybody freely used and average
That's
it
true.
with the years. You guys have all the data to
You
know
also have.
what was
Yeah.
a high point use year, shoot for that target, buy that, and then we're all safe and secure. Because if you cut us in half, we'd be at 3.5 units. At our house, I'm moving in with all of you. What's up, girl?
Cut it, you cut me off completely now.
But
Let
I
me
just
add
think
something
maybe
for
an
clarification.
average, because everybody's
Yeah.
got that story. We used to water everything, now everything dies every summer, and that's the way we've been. So go back to his bill, high point, that's what I want. We're up to 70 units now. I'm going 10 times it.
We used
Just
quite a
just
bit.
to follow up here, so during 2018, when you could use a lot of water, did you think you expressed that in your usage then, your water usage?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, so.
I mean, that's the way it was. They told us to use it.
That's the date I was gonna look at 2018
Yeah.
to try to get that target.
Was it
Yeah, we-
20?
And not, was it 19 or 18? 18 was the big summer, it's the
The
big
last
winter.
full water year.
18.
Yeah, because it goes 18, 19, it's
That's
straight.
when the newsletter said uses.
I'll find the big one,
Whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, find a big one.
Trying to get that number up from here.
If you look at 2018, is that like just as a whole, not like looking at each individual person's account?
You
That
almost,
we-
yeah.
Just one lump figure?
Well, to then go back though and develop a very equitable penalty system, you would need to look at an individual customer, because if you averaged 42, then, and maybe it would float, I don't know how you do it. So maybe 42 times 12 is some lump number. You have that to use for the year. And so you can use less when you don't want to and more in the summer, and then you have to voluntarily taper, knowing that you're approaching, I don't know. Or you just get the problem with doing it proportionally is you want more in the summer. And it doesn't,
Right.
you don't need all of it in the winter, so.
I've
And
done
the
math on that
software
for my-
can't handle it.
So I was just gonna say.
You'd have to ask your big cattle
That's where I was
ranchers
thinking, just.
and the people with all the horses how much
I've done
they
this
use.
on mine.
Maybe they could write it in and
And
send
you
it
gotta figure out, there's a lot of us that have animals out
Yep.
here, and when it's triple digits, it's
Yep.
in the summertime. So you go out there, you put your
Kinda
hand in that water, it's too hot.
Get some cool on that thing.
Oh my
No,
gosh,
I'm
I can't
kidding.
tell you what I did this year. And I don't wanna do it again.
I
So
get it.
we're gonna either do something with this, or I'm gonna do an alternate. Because
I
we
look-
even had water trucks come in.
Yeah.
I looked at my bill historically, and you can break the year down into 3 components. Your high use months, June, July, August, September, your medium use months, your April, May, your October, and your low use months.
That would
Very
require,
simple. And
that would require individual,
yes,
changing everybody's individual allotment every couple of months, and that would just can't happen.
no.
That's the
If you're asking customers to figure out how much they're gonna use for a full year, you've gotta look at that usage from.
We can get that number. It's
But you
just-
mainly wanna look at the high use months, because the others are gonna come into a standard usage.
There was billing a number of years ago when there was a drought, which was based on a percentage of what your prior
Right.
year's usage in that month
Right.
was, and then it went up and up and up, depending on how far over you went. Why couldn't we do something like that?
Exactly, yeah.
Like I said, it would have to be compared to the prior months, not a rolling average or something, because then you would be changing it all the time, but if you can,
Yeah,
if you can look back to the prior,
Yeah,
Year,
we
we'll
did
look at
like 50% of 2018 usage.
Right.
yeah.
but that was month to month to month though.
Yes, it
Yeah,
was.
Yes.
month to month to month.
Yeah, it was, it changed every month,
Well,
it's.
You don't have to have the answer right now.
I think.
You can't do 50% usage in a low usage month, or to a customer who only uses 2 or 3 because they live in a mobile home park. You can't cut them from 3 to 1.5.
Well, I don't think we're talking about that, we're talking,
No.
we're hopefully gonna get to 85% or some number like that.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah,
85-90% is where you wanna be, if it's 50%, then everybody dies and,
no, and half you can make it through if you're careful.
If you're high usage, you can maybe get by, but, like I said, but I don't think that district would want to put all of the users in a 50% conditionally, that would be
be
terrific.
goal.
That would, that would be worse than we had this year.
Right.
I'm
You already
assuming
know
somebody's
that-
gonna be looking for water in February.
By the end of February,
What does it say here? I think somewhere like that. I mean,
It
even
says
now,
if the water's
I'd
used,
kinda
it's
like to look at it, January. If
Whatever, as
it's
soon
not
as the
reached
ball, as
out,
soon as the ball drops, go look for water.
there you go. Find out where McConnell's partying on New Year's Eve and buy him a drink.
There you go, buy a drink.
well, all the other districts know, we got the same email, that there's gonna be cutbacks. So they're gonna be proactive and get water locked in as quickly as possible.
There was no reason we couldn't have got some of that water this year.
Maybe I'll work on that next week.
Thank you.
You also, the ag, I think we're making a big mistake by not at least doing, ag reports. Because my understanding was with an ag report, it helps secure amount of water.
No, in a drought year, the Bureau curtails ag first. And for example, this year, there was no ag, service water available.
Right.
And it was only a percent of M&I. So it behooves us as customers to use M&I water, for all of your hobby farms, et cetera. Now, in the district, I was talking to the Bureau about that because this issue came up and I wanted some transparency. I said that there's ag use customers in the district that were concerned that if they didn't file these reports and didn't do this sort of thing, they couldn't get ag water. And, well, right now, well, right now, and ag water's more expensive than M&I. It was last year, and it still is in this year's water rates. Whether that persists, I don't know, but we do have an ag rate available. Should ag water dip below M&I, I guess you all that can qualify for a business under ag, a commercial business under ag, can file your reports and do that. For anyone that has income other than agriculture coming into their residence, they would qualify for using M&I for their activities relative to animals, etc. Orchards, whatever. I guess orchards aren't even ag.
Yeah, it is.
I think that, well, I think the Bureau said something different to me about that.
Even with all the olive oil?
Yeah.
So the things have changed on that.
Well, we don't need to parse that, but in any case, they did not indicate that there would be any issues relative to people using M&I for activities where there was other income coming into the property that support their livelihood. So, and I think that probably wraps up. I mean, if you were on Social Security, for crying out loud, you'd be bringing in other income relative to your ag business. So they're not going to be coming in and going, hey, you can't use that M&I water on your goats. You go, well, time the heck out. It just didn't sound like it was a plausible outcome. As they said, we sell you the water, and you can color it any which way you want. You know, if you want to buy ag, you get it at this rate. You want to buy M&I, you get it at this rate. Except for the ag piece, which I think comes back to the rates of the restoration fee rates. They wanted to make sure that was accounted for appropriately. There's a differential there.
The other issue is Reclamation's been selling us a certain amount of acre feet a year as ag water. If we all of a sudden all switch to M&I, they're gonna say, no, you historically this, because it's about money for them too.
At our meeting with them, they said they just did not care. They said it would behoove us to use M&I because because the ag is what gets curtailed.
How are they gonna
But what they
track?
did say, I said, well, it all qualifies for M&I anyways because it's all treated. None of it's ag. I told them that.
Yeah.
They said, no, doesn't matter. We have other instances, precedents where people have treated water and it was still ag. And I forgot exactly the context of the conversation, but that was interesting. I didn't know that. I thought, hell, if there isn't more proof that it's M&I after you've treated it, good Lord, what is? Anyways, but that never, it seems like it shouldn't be a concern of us.
But they're selling us ag water almost 3 times M&I water. When ag in a normal water year. So I'm looking at how do you, if you switch everything.
Because historically, that's because historically, A, ag water was cheaper. B, the district had a very favorable rate for ag for its customers that could qualify. And so the district bought a lot of ag water. But now the district no longer has a much, in my opinion, a much more equitable rate schedule. And so we'll be buying more M&I water. And during a drought, we will have more allocated to us as a result of that.
You need to understand that the ag customer was paying an ag surcharge based on acreage too, though.
I've done the math up and down, and I can give you an extensive report about both how customers that were domestic customers that didn't support the district because they didn't buy enough water because they had too low of a base rate, and I can give you numbers on ag customers that cost the district every year substantial amount of money because of the rate structure. The rate structure was perverted in terms of allowing the district to function financially. I'm done talking about that. I mean, I have a spreadsheet that just breaks it all down, and it's all water under the bridge. We don't need to.
Sorry.
Yeah, we don't need to litigate that. I prefer not to litigate that because it just makes me angry, because that's why we're here. Anger's yeah, it's a lot, it's okay to be angry now and again, isn't it? It's not
If it's
socially
controlled.
PC if you're not. Anywho,
And the lakes are gonna be full this year anyway, so don't worry about it.
Yeah. it's
Yeah.
gonna
yeah.
And they'll
So-
figure out a way to
You're
do it.
right.
be- Yeah.
I do have a
Until
quick
no
question
rain in
about
December and
grants.
January.
So let's close the bit on item number 3, the supplemental and drought water. Sounds like we're
Split.
Next month.
yeah, I don't know if I kind of, if you want to know my opinion, I want to try to service the district fully with drought water from a equity perspective, administrative perspective, and what else? Probably just those 2. Oh, and a means of demonstrating to water purveyors that we are in control of water use relative to beneficial uses of water during a drought, and not squandering it or being, not
I understand
capable.
what
Yeah,
you're
but
saying.
in your eyes, you don't have animals. You don't have anything to feed but you. But for us to have animals, we have to, I go to Anderson and take my showers there. And I took my clothes down there to wash. I packed water, we trucked in water, so my animals could survive. Because I wasn't gonna be like some of them out here. A lot of them sold all their animals.
But to be
It's
clear,
sad.
Brenda, to be clear, when you hear me say fully supply the district with drought water, I mean go after that quantity of water, which is 80 or 90% of our 2018 use. So a substantial pile of water, not some piddly piece that we're all back in serious curtailment mode. No, I mean, it just means that, for full disclosure, it means that per rate HCF will be slightly more than if we didn't. So, but we're all in this together. We're all supporting the infrastructure together. If it's $1.38 for an HCF or $1.33, we really shouldn't get all balled up about that. We should just make sure that we can service the whole spectrum of customers in a satisfactory way, which I think if we go after 85, 90% of the water, let's hope we can secure that much. I mean, I throw that around like it's gonna be easy peasy. I might have a rude awakening about what's available, but that's would be what I mean when I say that.
Yeah, the other thing is, if you buy the supplemental water, the district is gonna be charging that off at first, that would be the first thing that would come off your bill. So then, again, unless you bought, lake of supplemental, the supplemental water is basically gonna be gone by the time that you get into the serious, heat and everything anyway. It would, on paper, it's gone. You used up your supplemental,
Only,
and then now you revert to the other rate structure.
one of my concerns, Cedric, I like your idea, but one of my concerns is if you go for the cheaper water McConnell, it's not pay as you go. It is, this is how much you want, you have to pay for every drop whether you use it or not.
We don't have to pay up front.
No.
We do have to use it all up, so it would be the first stuff we draw on, for sure. If we got 3,500 acre feet, and we got 1,000 acre feet of McConnell, is McConnell out there listening to this? Please, McConnell, think of us kindly.
There you go.
We would be using that 1,000 acre feet first. We'd use it before we even ran Bureau water. We might leave the Bureau water to the very end of the year, because it's the cheapest. Why would you expose yourself to the risk of hanging on to the queen of spades when you're playing hearts, baby? You drop that queen early.
The thing is historically
Rummy?
though, they have done that. And I think you're gonna get pushback from Irwin on this because he has that experience to where they did purchase the 1,000 acre feet and the district, they didn't allocate it outright and they were stuck having to
Dave's gonna
Eat
explain
the
it
money.
in such a clear way. that everyone
What
can-
It's on you, Dave. Skip is no longer here.
Reclamation may not let you use it first, they might want you to use theirs first.
No.
You better
no,
check it.
no,
You
no.
should
That's
make
not
sure.
how that works. Those
Just
guys
make
have the
sure.
ability to schedule their water the way they wanna schedule their water, they just have to submit it monthly, that's the rules. And then they can reschedule water, which is why Reading was able to get us water, is because the Bureau, thank you Bureau of Reclamation, was able to reschedule some of their earlier water. I don't know how it all worked, but they were able to shift their water around, and voila,
Transfers.
all of a sudden, yeah, they had water available.
Runs down the dam, that's it.
There it is.
Are we going to be able, if we don't use all the city of Reading water this year, do we carry over to next year, the 500?
No.
Okay. My question
Stays in
is,
Shasta.
the Bureau of Reclamation at this point doesn't seem like they want to fill Shasta, because they allowed a whole bunch of water to be released during this rainstorm we had. And, which I don't understand that at all. So I think, thinking that we're going to be able to buy water is being very optimistic. I think we need to have a back plan, a plan B, because unless we get some horrendous amount of water this year, and
you know what?
unless they stop releasing it down the river.
We don't get ours from the reclamation
Yeah.
through whiskey, we get it through whiskey,
Yeah.
not
But how about we
Shasta.
buy it from the city of Reading? That's coming from Shasta, that's
Oh.
coming from Whiskey.
It was made available by their well water.
I mean, there's hardly anything in Shasta
Yeah.
right now.
It went up
Thanks.
2.6 feet.
So, you guys all know where I'm at on this. Dave, I think, Dave, you're kind of a similar mind.
Yeah, like I said, I think, you know, all customers should be treated fairly and equally, you know. And this supplemental seems to be, to me, pushing costs onto ag customers that are.
It allows them to purchase water they need.
Yeah, we
So,
don't care.
Any
if
customer.
you guys all would be willing, I'd like to close this part of the meeting and move on to any other final comments you all have before we adjourn?
The only thing that I would say is possibly talk to our bigger ranchers and our bigger cattle people and find out how much they would need in a year. And because we have a few, they're not big, but, I mean, they're not that many of them, but they are big.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We'll have to do that. Hopefully their 2018 water use reflects their,
Yeah, usage.
yeah, I think it should.
If they're a large user, you know, they aren't gonna go out and you know, you said the customers went out and used all kinds of water because the district said it was there. If they're commercial agriculture, they're gonna use the same, you know, they're gonna use what they need. They're going to be.
Well, they've sold off cattle this year.
Correct, yeah, but I'm
And
just
not
saying that-
good.
Yeah, that's why I said it, you know, yeah, the 2018 or whatever, 2018 probably the same as 2017, same as 2016,
Yeah.
you know, because there, you wouldn't see that kind of fluctuation.
Yeah.
You know, they're just gonna use the amount of water they need to make the most profit, you know, so.
Well, they grow hay, and plus those
Yeah.
cattle during the summer
Yeah,
drink
right.
a heck of a lot of water,
Right.
especially the mamas with babies.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Maybe add a buffer for all the breaks we've had. Cause that's not gonna go away.
Yeah, I totally agree, yeah.
Fire-
So we'll definitely be talking about this again, in terms of the numbers. And success, I'll send out a few feelers on whether or not there's water to be had. And kind of their sales kind of timing. I don't know when, I'm not clear when those sorts of sales are made available. For example, McConnell, it seemed like the district always shopped it in their early spring, you know.
March.
Which,
Too late.
yeah,
Might be.
nice to get something secured at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know their commitment, so it'll be good to just have a conversation with them. Because, you know, they've been dealing water for a long time, and I'm sure people get used to that relationship. And ours has been on and off with them, so. You know, and maybe we think about doing a little bit of purchases of water even in a good year, just to make sure we're first. And we, you know, keep that relationship nice and lucrative. Because it's not that, I mean, it's not that much per se when you're talking about.
How are we looking financially to make the payments on the water that we have purchased?
We're about to pay off Bella Vista.
Okay, good.
Was that the
59.
land?
Yeah, so the first payment was the 27,000, and then this one is 26,800 something.
Were we able to make that?
Is our reserve going up?
It's looking better.
Yeah.
Slowly, but better than it has.
I characterized our path forward to another district customer that we didn't go over the cliff, but it's gonna be, and our finances are somewhat stabilized, and that it's just gonna be a long slog out of our financial hole that we're in. Next month will be the first month where we see the base rate hit the books, which will help see the, you know, the draft line on the boat go up a little higher. But we're a patient that's in IC, and, you know, you don't wanna go in and visit them too often because they might kick the bucket on you right then and there. You wanna just let them lie until next month to get some food down.
And we can pay our bills, we've been able to pay all our bills, our payables are reasonable.
Have any of the customers that haven't paid been paying?
Oh,
No.
I mean,
No.
every once in a while, but there's still a lot that.
If you can get away with it, why would you tell?
I just thought maybe they would.
Are those people that are not paying, are they using a lot of water? So why don't we do what Cedric suggested? Why doesn't the district limit them? If they're not gonna pay for the
We
water,
should put a rate.
give them a minimum amount that makes them.
Bill said
that's
they
what
just
it's
pull it
supposed to
right
be.
out,
There's a
just
lot
like
of
that.
Yeah,
people
that's.
that,
So it's almost a
I mean,
waste.
they could just
Did
unuse it.
you hear Bill say
keep
that?
drilling them.
That he puts it in, they go out there and they can just pull it right out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That's
yeah,
crazy.
I mean, we get, but there's squatter issues out here super bad. So we know they're not paying for it, cause it's not even in their name. So we go out and, you know, for the most part, we have to take meters out. Sometimes they have to get concreted, because they'll go in there, they'll stick hoses in there, they'll destroy them, it's bad.
See, I would think,
It's really bad.
policy-wise for the board, if Bill goes out and he puts in one of those regulators, and then somebody pulls it out, then legally, that would give the district the right to turn them off and shut them off. And
Oh,
then,
we do.
like Christie said, you know, if you gotta go out there with concrete, you fill it up with concrete and pull a meter out.
The
or
sad
whatever.
part is you can do that, and then they'll just go right over to their neighbor's house and start messing with their stuff. It happened on Scout for months and months and months.
Ooh.
I had a lady call me the other day and found a hose attached to her hose bib and a hole in her chain link fence out the back corner of her property.
Isn't that illegal? Wouldn't that be illegal?
Well, yeah, it's with water theft.
Just
You can try to stop them, and you can try to stop
Put
Do
in
them.
you
the
guys go
fertilizer
and
full of Roundup.
do you file any kind of a? Well, I mean, can you
No,
go to
no,
the
put
police, can you go to the sheriff?
Roundup.
Well, they might be drinking it too.
You can go to the
I mean, if
sheriff.
you don't do anything to the people, they're just gonna continue
They're
doing it.
trespassing, yeah, you could do that.
Well, we answered
Yeah, but
that.
have you ever heard of how
Next.
dramatic the squatters' rights are?
How what?
Dramatic.
Trying to kick somebody out, there's